Thank you very much. First of all, I have to admit something. I have what we call in this part of Europe muscle fever or muscle pain from yesterday's party aerobics that I went to prepare for this event. And today, as you can see in the background, we will not do the party aerobics, we will do some yoga pilates. So please choose your ball and have a seat, Carla. We'll see how it works. Yeah, it's quite okay. We can also jump. Yep. Depends. I mean, if we get some interesting questions, we'll start jumping. And yes, please, to the live audience, please raise some questions, write it in the chat, and the live audience here in the room, write it on a piece of paper that you will get. And I also have some questions prepared, and the first one is a tricky question. So I will say one quote, and you will tell me what you think about it. The other in our geography is a site of disgust. The other in their geography is a source of pleasure. In our place, the other is a pollution. In their place, the other is romantic, beautiful, exotic. So I'm sure you recognize the quote. But what do you think about it? First of all, do you know actually from whom the quote is?
Yes, the quote is from anthropologist Edward Brunner, who was one of the pioneer anthropologists in studying tourism. And for me, the quote really represents this notion of how the West has had a racialized gaze on other communities, other populations, other groups. And in this case, it refers specifically to tourism, but I think we can extrapolate and make it be useful for our understanding of how the West has seen the rest of the world and why we need to make a change in that regard.
And I found, I have to admit, the quote in your book, so this is why I was quite sure that you know who is it from, in the conclusion of your new book titled From Temporary Migrants to Permanent Attractions. And tell us a little bit about the book. So it was published this year.
Well, the version in English was published in 2020, actually right during the pandemic, so it hasn't been read as widely as I wished. I hope that you read it, actually. And the translation to the book to Spanish was published December of last year. And
okay.
Yeah.
The translation to Spanish was published last year.
Last year, and I had the opportunity to
quite
share
recent
it.
and fresh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
So who are we? Who are they? Are we here, they, or are we, or what's the distinction?
I think it's a very complex situation. I think that all of the videos that we watched and my conversation hopefully highlight that the we and the they changes significantly depending on the context. But if we don't open our eyes to that complexity, we are missing a great deal. If we make assumptions about what is knowledge even, that's one of my pet things, we are missing a lot of information. We are missing a lot of wealth of knowledge that is there.
Somebody mentioned in the talk previously the term the global south. So what's your opinion about the term? I mean, it's a bit bizarre because, for example, Australia belongs to the global north somehow, China to the global south. So what do you think about this confusion? Should we keep the term? Should we throw it away? Should we rethink it? What's your opinion?
I personally think that it continues to be useful because it is a geopolitical term. It's not only a geographical term. It's not literal. In some instances it is, in some others it's not. It refers to the inequalities that exist in the world that have not been erased. The colonized mentality that many of us continue to have and continue to reproduce in educational systems at all levels. So for me, I continue to find it useful. In fact, you and I are working together on an edited volume that talks about why anthropology needs the global south. That's our main question. So I continue to believe that it's useful, recognizing that it has limitations.
And you moved from south to north, from Ecuador to the US, and now you moved for a shorter period of time from Newark in Delaware to Ljubljana. How do you see, from your perspective, as an anthropologist, as somebody from the South, the US, is it still the center of the world? Is Slovenia the periphery and Ecuador? How do you see these relations, center, periphery, north and south? So where do we stand?
I think the US continues to be a dominant power. I'm not sure if it's the full center of the world, but it continues to be necessary and present, and it continues to have quite a bit of power and leverage. And Slovenia is, according to some terms that I have read, a semi-periphery, not a periphery, and Ecuador is absolutely the periphery. Unfortunately, Ecuador has really no relevance in global politics, with some very minor exceptions. And that is why I think it's so interesting, and that's the story that I wanted to share with all of you, that coming from that tiny periphery, I was able to learn about a discipline in such an excellent way that it allowed me to continue my studies in a center without problems, except for the language problem. I find that really, really remarkable, I have to say.
You told us earlier a little bit about your story. So you were born and raised in Ecuador, which is, from the Slovenian perspective, not really a periphery, at least by the number of its inhabitants. It has 15 times, it's 15 times bigger than Slovenia. I calculated yesterday, and it's a home of 9 times more people than Slovenia. So there is a bit more than 2 million of Slovenian inhabitants in total. But in the global scheme of things, you say that Slovenia is semi-periphery, you think that Ecuador is a periphery. So still, tell us, how was it coming of age in Ecuador from your perspective? So how was it growing up there? And why did you move actually to the US? So what made you move? And do you feel homesick? I know that you often travel back.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate because I'm able to come back to my country often and to be with my family, my siblings. My niece is coming to visit for 7 weeks in January. I'm very excited about that. I'm very privileged. I have a great upbringing. I have fantastic parents and siblings, and a middle-class background, which allowed me to go to the university in Ecuador, and I think which helped me remain curious and seeking for other opportunities. And I applied for a grant that was available at my university, the Catholic University. I got the grant, and I was able to go for my master's, then found all sorts of jobs and opportunities in order to continue for my doctorate degree, and found a job. So it was one thing after the other that allowed me to stay in the US and have opportunities like coming to this country, which otherwise it would have never ever happened.
And what do you like about the US? So we have often many stereotypes about living in the US. What's the image of the US globally? We talk about its hegemonic position in the world. So what do you like about it? What can we learn from the US? What can we bring, or what can we, working in anthropology or being applied anthropologists, use from the US approaches?
Well, my training and my background has mostly been academic, although I have worked on applied anthropology, have done numerous applied projects. And from that vantage point of being a professor at a university, one of the things that I find particularly helpful and wonderful about the US is that it's a flexible system that welcomes people from other parts of the world, which makes it always dynamic. There's always new thought and new people coming up as a result of that. That I find very, very enriching. And I have noticed that that's not always the case in other academic environments in parts of the world where I have been. So that's one thing that I absolutely rescue about anthropology in the United States. And also the efforts that so many anthropologists all over are doing at the moment to make sure that their students are well trained to continue their studies and to continue and to find a job. The truth is that in the United States, at least, more than 60% of anthropologists do not go to an academic job, do not continue as academics. They actually find jobs outside academia. And nowadays there's a large movement of anthropologists all over the country working really hard to make sure that their students understand the skills that they are learning in order to be able to find jobs in a number of different fields. To me, that's also something that should be respected very much.
So this is not your first time in Slovenia, you already said that, so you're coming back, you keep coming back. I think it's your 4th or 5th time here.
I was trying to remember.
Probably you don't know yourself how many times you were here. What can the US learn from Slovenia? What do you like here? I mean, people say the nature, the environment, that we have, I don't know, 60% of the land is covered in forests, but next to that, what can the US learn from Slovenia and Slovenian people?
Yes, it could learn a lot. I see that people here have a high quality of life, and it shows in people's lives. I love that people are able to walk everywhere, take public transportation, all of those things that we are missing so badly in the United States. That notion that working should not be our main effort, it should be one of our efforts, but we should make sure that we have time for family, friends, and enjoyment. That, at least in academia in the United States, I see missing. I see a lot of work towards trying to recognize that we need to move towards a way of living that is more like in Slovenia, in that sense.
What's strange for me is that we don't collaborate more. I mean, I've also traveled a couple of times to the US, to the Society for Applied Anthropology meeting and other meetings, but we don't have any common research projects. I mean, we go here and there, present what we do. Why don't we collaborate more? Have you got any solutions how to be more productive together? How also to create something that could become, I don't know, global anthropology or global applied anthropology? Any ideas, solutions for that? And I'm not talking only about the Europe and US connections, but to bring all continents together.
I think that nowadays, since we have all of this technology that allow us to be so connected, we could find some solutions, some options. One of the first elements for the solution is to precisely have a conversation. Again, we have been talking about this since the 1960s, but perhaps now that we are at a different moment in time, we could come up with a network, a way to transform the conversation and make it much more even, much more equal, at a level playing field that is equal. I think that possibility can exist nowadays because of the technology that we have available. But first, we need to recognize that it is fruitful to do it.
Your list of academic achievements is really impressive, and I'm always fascinated in how many boards of different associations are you. So you're currently the treasurer of the Society for Applied Anthropology, one of the oldest, or maybe the oldest, applied anthropology society in the world.
Yes, it was founded in the 1940s.
And our network in 2010, if I remember correctly. You're also a member of the Outreach and Education Advisory Board of the American Anthropological Association, so AAA. And in addition, you've held several positions here in the EASA Applied Anthropology Network. You've served as advisory board member. Are you doing okay on the ball? Yeah. But it's good for the back, you know. Yeah, and you were several times also a member of the organizing team of this event, Why the World Needs Anthropologists. But okay, you have all these labels and titles, and you're in many boards and important associations, but why I like working with you, writing with you, communicating with you, and also having fun partying with you is because you are, to be honest, a normal, straightforward person, a kind person. And how did you manage to stay this way? You know, how did you manage to remain this Carlita from the block, if I can paraphrase Jennifer Lopez, who was Jenny from the block? So how can you stay normal in academia? This is the question.
That is a question. But by the way, Carlita, it was my nickname. It continues to be, actually. And I learned that that my name was Carla when I was 5 years old. Before that, I swore I was Carlita. That everybody called me that way. So that's an endearing term for me. But I honestly see the opportunities that I have had and the opportunity to study, in particular in a country like Ecuador, as a huge privilege. It's not a right, unfortunately, in my country. It should be, but it's not. And because I've had that opportunity, that blessing, I cherish it with all my heart. And the normal part, I think, is simply because I think that I recognize that I know very little. And when I open my heart and my mind to interact with others, I learn from them, and we all learn from each other. So for me, nowadays, I have already gone through all the rituals, the rites of passage in anthropology, right? I did my fieldwork solo, etc. Now, I derive the most pleasure when I work with others, because I learn from them, I interact, I have fun with other colleagues, and that to me is much more enjoyable.
And you've also changed a little bit throughout your career, I guess, because you moved to the US and traveled the world, and you were involved in, as said, different associations, organizations. The world has also changed you, probably. So, coming to this question of change, so how do you think anthropology should change, or will change, or will have to change, to answer the crucial questions of today, including how to make the world safer for human differences, as anthropologist Ruth Benedict once said. So how can we, or should we, adapt anthropology to the new reality, to a more polarized world, to new peripheries rising in the world, to the world where, as we all know, populism is on the rise? So what can we do?
Of course, I'm only one person with one voice, but I believe fully in ethnography. I think that that's our superpower. That's the thing that we do best perhaps, and the thing that we should continue to refine and fine-tune. And I think that the discipline has morphed and has evolved. Nowadays we have digital anthropology, we have ethnographies. We use the same tools, the classical tools that we had, and we adapt them to the present time. And that is what allows the discipline to be more dynamic. But also, we have lended this superpower to others, because ethnography is a transdisciplinary method. It's not only at the purview of anthropology. So by collaborating with others, by using our ethnographic understandings and collaborating with other scientists and other scholars and humanists and normal people also from any society, I think that we can combine all of that and trying to find answers to the problems that we have. And anthropology, that's the beauty of anthropology in my perspective, and I apologize for talking so much about anthropology, but I actually do love it. I know that it has this very, very obscure origin. I know all of that, of course, but I do think that there's a great power in the discipline that maybe all of us have chosen for our lives. And this possibility of seeing culture as a system of interrelated patterns. That's what anthropology does best, and I think we should continue to work on that.
I'll just check if there are some questions from the audience, online or offline, or yes? Yeah, there is one question. So Anusha, please come here. And we have a couple of questions, actually. Oh my God. More and more questions are coming. Okay, first question. I'll just randomly pick this one. What is the regional perception of tourism in South America in the relationship to the global South cultures viewed as the other? And then in the brackets, pop culture, social traditions, and connection to the environment.
The original view.
What is the regional, regional perception of tourism in South America in the relationship to the global South cultures, viewed as the other?
This one is difficult because I'm not sure which angle to take on that question. It depends on the location. In some locations, local or regional communities have welcomed tourism, have used tourism, have appropriated the possibilities that tourism offers in order to have better lives and better opportunities. In the case of the research that I conducted in Panama, for instance, Afro-Antilleans use tourism as a means to be inserted into a country that had always seen them as temporary migrants. That's hence the title of my book. So it depends. Okay. Quilombola communities, for instance, with whom I have also worked, have chosen to use tourism as a means to attain sovereignty. And in some other cases, the situation is very dire and tourism it has quite negative consequences. So it depends. Okay,
we have a nice question here. Will we see a time in future when anthropologists from the global south have the resources to research the global north, and by looking through non-Eurocentric theories?
I will absolutely love that. I will be there if that happens, and I would love to make it happen. So one way to do it perhaps will be to work together to create a network and come up with grant opportunities, financing these possibilities, these trips, these collaborations. That would be amazing. I would love to do that. And I think that being in the privileged position where I am, I actually could do it. So maybe I will do it.
Okay, so let's turn around the perspective as soon as possible. And I have one question for you too. So it's a very current situation that we are facing, that the world is actually facing, the US election in 2 weeks or so, right? So what will happen, in your opinion, about this duality of the center and the periphery if Donald Trump wins the US election? And what will happen to anthropology? So it's not an impossible situation, right? Now I checked today the polls and it's like 50-50 actually. What do you think? So what does the future hold for anthropology if one president is elected and the other?
I don't even want to think about that possibility, to be fully honest, but I think that anthropology can provide quite a bit of at least an understanding, and as a result of having an understanding of why things happen the way they happen, to have solutions for this situation. There are numerous anthropologists who have nowadays chosen to study groups like MAGA and other organizations that are supporting Donald Trump. And they come up with great ethnographies, again, the power of ethnography, to help us understand the underlying reasons as to why this is happening, before we can form a critical opinion, obviously. So I think that anthropology can help in that way. I hope that it can also help towards social change and transforming the situation if this tragedy were to happen.
Why do you think there hasn't been any anthropologist who would be brave enough to be a candidate for the US president? I mean, the closest we got was with Barack Obama, whose mother was trained as an anthropologist. So why are there so few anthropologists in important political positions who become global decision makers? So why are we just critical, and why don't we stand up, take the position and do something, change the world for the better, hopefully for the better?
Exactly, and I think that precisely applied anthropology, practicing anthropology does that. There are many anthropologists who work for senators as aides, not as senators, but they provide information that the senators then use to make policy. So that's one way in which anthropologists are present. But the discipline is quite marginal, unfortunately. I hope it weren't, but it is. And I think more anthropologists should become politicians. I will not be one of them.
Me neither. I mean, I told this in public several times. I mean, I don't want to go into this because you get your hands dirty, right, in politics, and we don't want that. But maybe we should. I don't know. Maybe you should. So how to persuade the graduates of anthropology to go into politics? In Slovenia, for example, if you're an actor, you can become the prime minister. If you're an electrical engineer, you become a prime minister. if you're an anthropologist, nobody has dared so far.
I'm not sure that, I'm not going to answer that, because I do not think that we should go that route, but I do think that we can influence politicians, precisely because I don't think that we want to dirty our hands, right? But I do think that we have the possibility of influencing public policy, and we have done it since the beginning of the discipline. So many anthropologists have been public figures. It's just that nowadays, the discipline has not been able to achieve that degree of relevance as before.
Okay, the final question. This is, again, a tricky one, of course. What does the future hold for anthropology, in your opinion? How do you imagine the future of anthropology in 10 years?
Again, I continue to think that if we continue to work hard at developing our ethnographic skills, we'll be able to continue to be relevant. And recognizing how we can translate those skills in a number of different fields and disciplines and jobs, if we continue to recognize that what we do is valuable, the future of anthropology will be bright. So one of our friends, Ryan Nolan, says it better, I think, because he says that perhaps we don't need more anthropologists, but we certainly need more anthropological thinking. And that holistic view of the world, that opportunity to suspend judgment before, in order to understand why people do certain things the way they do, and then have a critical perspective again, those elements that are so core, the core of our discipline, need to remain there.
Just one more question, please. So we have a couple of students here in this room too, and some of them are probably following us online. And how can we stop this mantra, the ongoing mantra, I will not get a job if I become an anthropologist? I mean, it's a kind of disease, I think, spreading now throughout the generation. I mean, what can we do to stop this? I mean, because anthropologists do get jobs, right?
Anthropologists do get jobs
they get jobs
circle.
outside academia too. So yes. How can we stop this self-fulfilling prophecy? Because if you come with this idea, if you start studying with this idea, then it could become a reality.
I can provide example of what is happening again in the United States, where there's this network called Anthropology Career Readiness Network, and it's composed of hundreds of people all over the US and abroad who are working hard at kind of distilling the skills that we learn in anthropology and making them really accessible to all kinds of individuals. So that's one way to perhaps take advantage of all that free information that is available at the network. That's what I do with my students. I have them explain to me what they are learning, how they can use what they are learning in practical terms in many job possibilities, so to eliminate the exoticism of the discipline. And the other thing is to start working on anthropological themes and maybe even anthropology itself from kindergarten up until university. So not to make it, again, exotic, to make it somewhat mainstream, so children can think about anthropology as an option and it doesn't become this very, very otherized discipline, this peripheric discipline.
I like this suggestion very much. So let's bring anthropology not only to primary and secondary schools, but to kindergarten. And then we have to explain in a very simple way what can anthropologists do and why the world needs anthropologists, right?
Yes, so just so you know, I am in a seminar, I'm leading a seminar of teachers from K to 12 who are learning about food from an anthropological perspective. And they, at the end, prepare units that are shared all over and teach anthropology, in this particular case, through food to their students. So there are many ways in which anthropology can become more mainstream.
We'll take one more question from the audience. Anusha, thank you very much. Okay. The final question from the audience. What would be your take on the previously mentioned relationship between the academic, more observational position an anthropologist usually takes up and the moral role or responsibility in applied anthropology?
Yes, that's one misconception about anthropology, because the discipline itself started as an applied practice, unfortunately for very negative consequences to expand colonialism, but it was applied. And nowadays, again, we have had this distinction between academic and applied that is so problematic. Latin American anthropology, in fact, has characterized itself for being very committed to social justice and transformation. That has been the entire aspect of its core. Argentinian anthropologists, for example, see themselves as militant anthropologists in many circumstances, because they see the moral responsibility as ever present. There's simply no denial. And this assumption that you can be a detached observer and simply observing and not exert change is highly problematic.
So to quote Karl Marx, and to paraphrase this famous quote, which is engraved on his tombstone, the purpose of anthropology is not only to observe the world, the purpose of anthropology is to change it, right? Hopefully for the better.
For the better, yes.
And with this thought, we conclude this panel discussion. Thank you so much, Carla, for keeping coming back, not only to Slovenia, but to why the world needs anthropologists. I'm sure this is not the last time we meet here at this event. And we'll announce soon, I guess, where the next event, 2025, will happen. Thank you, Carla Guerrón Montero from Ecuador and University of Delaware.